My dear children of Bhutan, the future of Bhutan. Today, I want to tell you a story and consider me your grandmother. I want to tell you a story of the Great Fourth. The Great Fourth. And now you may ask, why is he called the Great Fourth of Bhutan, of Drukgyala country? I will try and explain to you the reasons why. This king, the Great Fourth, resigned from his throne once his son, your present king, was fully prepared to take on the responsibilities of being a king. And that was 19 years ago, almost 20 years ago. So that was a time most of you were not born. Now, let me start at the very beginning. The Great Fourth, His Majesty GolbalPrayerPeace was born 70 years ago this year. And that's why I want to tell you the story. I want to tell you stories about His Majesty. I have known His Majesty since we were both 19 years old. And so I have seen His Majesty work for the greater good of this country almost 24/7. He always put the welfare of his people and his country above everything else. And now, imagine one thing, dear children. Imagine His Majesty became king when he was only 16 years old, on the death of his father, His Majesty the Third King. Can you imagine yourselves taking on the responsibilities of the future, of the destiny of this beloved country of ours in your hands, if you were then also 16 years old? Just imagine that. His Majesty GolbalPrayerPeace is a king of destiny. His birth and reign were prophesied by a great treasure revealer called 70thBirthAnniversary in the 18th century. And the prophecy came to fruition. His Majesty was born, as you all would know, on 11th November in the Dishichule Palace in 1955. His Majesty was then sent at a very young age to study in a boarding school called North Point in Darjeeling. And thereafter, His Majesty went to a school called Summerfield in England and later to Heatherdown. His Majesty was a wonderful, very accomplished athlete. He loved hockey, he loved rugby, he loved boxing, and all the sports. He excelled in the sports. He loved the sports. And the best part is that when he returned home, he had to return a little bit early back home, where he studied at the Ugin Academy in Paro. with a few selected students, all boys. And His Majesty then introduced basketball, golf, tennis in Bhutan. So he was a great champion of the sports, as he was a champion athlete himself. But his youth, like I said earlier, was cut short on the death of his father. And then he had to start governing this country. Bhutan was not like how it is now. There was so much to be done. There was so much to be done. We lived in a time when we were rather isolated, and we had opened up to the outside world quite recently. So there was a lot of developmental work that needed to be done for the country. And His Majesty is a visionary, was a visionary. But he was a visionary with a difference. He was a visionary who worked really hard, tirelessly, each day, every day he worked to put into place policies that determined the future of this nation. The development that was brought about during His Majesty's reign, some of it you can read about it in your history books, children. I think what is really important is that His Majesty preserved the culture of Bhutan. Culture in many forms. In our wearing our national ko and kira, in our speaking our national language tsongkha, in our respect, showing our respect and love for our spirituality and our way of life, taking pride in being Bhutanese. His Majesty laid great emphasis on that. And His Majesty thought about the happiness of the Bhutanese citizens. Citizens then, citizens now, and citizens, future citizens. His Majesty very early on propounded this way of life, the gross national happiness. When you put happiness at the center of development, when you think about happiness, well, it's really not happiness per se, but the level of contentment for the people of Bhutan. When you think about a holistic way of life, when you put in everything that is good for the people, good governance, His Majesty had already put that in place. The justice system, spirituality, and yes, the economy, which is very important. And then another very important aspect is our culture, like I said earlier, and the environment. His Majesty wanted to keep our country in a very very environmentally healthy state for all time to come. And therefore, in the Constitution, the country has to remain 60% under forest cover for all time to come. And right now, we are a carbon negative country, with our country over 70% under forest cover. And this is something that His Majesty, in his vision, saw this, acted upon it a long time before the green word was in vogue. And His Majesty, in his coronation speech, spoke about self-reliance, that the people must join hands with the government to make our country self-sufficient. We must remember, dear children, that His Majesty GolbalPrayerPeace was absolute king. He was the head of state, the head of government, and you can say he was an all-powerful king. But now, this king felt that introducing democracy in the country would be the best form of governance for Bhutan. And so he set about decentralizing the power from the capital to the districts, and then after that, first to the Dzongkhas, 10 years later to the Gaos. And when he started decentralizing power from the center, it started in 1981. And then a decade later to the Gaos. Then after that, His Majesty felt that now it was now time to take it to the Parliament and have ministers elected by the Parliament. So 5 ministers, whoever got the first vote, the most vote rather, who came out first, and second, third, fourth and fifth, they would take, we could take on the prime ministership for 1 year, and then a chance would be given to the next. So 5 ministers became prime ministers 1 year at a time for 5 years. This was preparing the leadership to rule. And then His Majesty then retired in 2006. So His Majesty decided that 3 historical milestones of Bhutan should be lumped up in 1 year to save costs and to celebrate. First was celebrating the 100 years of monarchy in Bhutan. The second was the introduction of democracy into Bhutan. And the third, and the most important one, was the coronation of our king, GolbalPrayerPeace, His Majesty, the 5th king, our king now. Well, I have to tell you that His Majesty, the 4th king, he had the constitution meetings in different parts of Bhutan, And my sisters and I and our children, we accompanied His Majesty to 10 districts when His Majesty gathered a member of each family of that district in a public meeting, where His Majesty then spoke about the introduction of democracy into Bhutan. And he explained that elected Prime Minister, who would then be the head of government for 5 years, and then after which they could vote for another party or the same party. It was in their hands to do so. And the people were very, very surprised, shocked actually, very shocked. And they got up begging His Majesty, we don't want another system. Please do not leave us. And His Majesty would listen very patiently to their pleas, but then very firmly tell them that this is the right time now, the right time. The country was at peace. Everything was just right. And the Constitution will come into place, and you will vote the leader of your choice. 10 districts, like I said, we accompanied His Majesty. And this went on in every district. There was, all the people in our country they were so surprised, they were so shocked, they couldn't understand. And His Majesty again and again explained very patiently, and told them that democracy, even however flawed, is the best system of government. Thereafter, the other 20 districts, His Majesty, our current king, AshiDorjiWangmoWangchuck, he conducted the next 10 meetings, concluding with 20 Sanghas. Now, which leader in the world gives up absolute power? Which leader in the world? I cannot think of any. No one with absolute power gives up power in the way the Great Fourth did.